Annie's quiet time was never because she forgot. It was because she was hurt. And now her story has changed. Everything we thought we knew about Annie's song, few singers ever touched America's heart like John Denver did. He wasn't just someone who sang songs. He was the voice of his time. A famous person who could take a simple guitar song and turn it into something that made people feel hopeful and loved. But behind those calm country songs and happy smiles was a big mess of hard times, broken hearts, and secrets that regular people never knew until now. And it all begins with the woman who gave him the idea for his most famous song, Annie Denver. At 78 years old, Annie Denver finally decided to talk. And what she told people shocked even the biggest John Denver fans. For many years, Annie's song has been thought of as a sweet love poem, simple, pretty, and lasting forever. But Annie told people something harder to understand, something more real. That famous song, often played at weddings and special days together, was really made during one of the worst times in their marriage. It wasn't written during a sweet picnic or a honeymoon walk under the stars. It was made after a big fight. The year was 1973. John and Annie Denver were already living in Aspen, Colorado, a beautiful place John had fallen in love with during one of their many camping trips. Aspen would become not only their home, but a special place that helped John write many of his songs. The tall mountains, clean air, and big skies made him feel good inside. But that year, angry feelings filled their house more than mountain air. One morning, after a big argument, John left the house by himself to go skiing. While riding the Ajax chair on Aspen Mountain, something weird happened. Words started coming into his head. Lines of a song started flowing easily. By the time he got to the top, he rushed back home, picked up his guitar, and in just 10 minutes, he had written Annie's song. 10 minutes after fighting came something that would last forever. But as Annie Denver later said in a special interview, that song was more than a love song. It was like a prayer, a way to say sorry, a musical "I'm sorry," and even today, many years after their marriage ended, Annie says that she still cries every time she hears it because it wasn't just a song. It was the last sound of a love that used to be, and maybe deep down always will be. Annie Denver was born Annie Martell on September 6, 1946, in Minnesota. She grew up in a close Christian family with 3 brothers and sisters and spent most of her young years living simply and quietly. That all changed in 1966 when she met a young talented music maker named John Denver, who back then was just another guy trying to make it with a band called the Chad Mitchell Trio. Annie was in her second year at Aldous College in St. Peter, and Denver right away liked her quiet beauty and strong personality. They met again soon after, and what started as letters between two dreamers quickly turned into a fast love story. 9 months later they were married. She was there for the start of it all. The small shows, the letters written by hand, the days when Denver gave free concerts just to get his name known. She was the quiet helper behind the man who would later take over American radio. It was Annie who stood by as he changed Babe, I Hate to Go into what would become Leaving on a Jet Plane, a song made famous by Peter, Paul, and Mary. And the first sign that this young music maker from New Mexico was meant for something bigger. And John Denver's rise was like a rocket. From Take Me Home Country Roads to Rocky Mountain High, he became a symbol of America's wild beauty and the feelings of a time when people were looking for meaning. With every word he sang, he caught both personal wanting and love for the country. His albums sold like crazy. He appeared on TV specials and even hosted his own shows in the US and the UK. When he sang, people stopped and listened. But as his fame grew, his marriage began to break under the heavy weight of it all. In a 1983 interview, John said that the success that powered his music came at the cost of his relationship. "We started moving apart," he said. "It had to do with the time we weren't spending together, and then being stubborn when we got back together to put our lives back together." He spoke the words calmly, but they carried the weight of years of feeling bad about hotel rooms, tour buses, and phone calls that came too late. Annie, on the other hand, had her own side of the story. She told people in later interviews that she was simply too young and not ready emotionally to handle her husband's sudden fame. She didn't know who she was anymore. She wasn't Annie Martell. She wasn't even Annie Denver. She was John Denver's wife, and that slowly broke her spirit. They tried for years. They tried, but in 1982, after 15 years of marriage, they got divorced. Most famous people's breakups are messy, mean, and hurtful. But not theirs. Even today, Annie stays nice when talking about her ex-husband. She stayed single. She raised their 2 adopted children, Zachary and Anna Kate. And she built a quiet life in Colorado, far from the bright lights of fame. But she never got away from the shadow of his music because every time she hears that familiar song, "You Fill Up My Senses," she is taken back to a time when love was clean, new, and just starting. But behind John Denver's gentle words and smiling shows was a man fighting with himself. Born Henry John Dutzkondorf Jr. on December 31, 1943 in Roswell, New Mexico. He was the son of a decorated U.S. Air Force pilot. His father was strict and didn't show feelings easily. His family moved all the time, and young John, shy and quiet, had trouble finding where he belonged. It wasn't until his grandmother gave him a guitar at age 11 that he found his voice. That guitar became his lifeline. He taught himself to play. He wrote songs in secret, and by the time he got to college at Texas Tech, he was playing at local clubs. But he was still using his real name until a folk music player suggested a change. John Denver sounded cleaner, more American, and it fit the image he would soon build. After leaving college, he moved to Los Angeles to chase music full-time. He joined the Chad Mitchell Trio, but later left to try it on his own. That choice changed everything. By 1969, he had released Rhymes and Reasons. It wasn't a quick success, but then Leaving on a Jet Plane was picked up by Peter, Paul, and Mary. And suddenly, doors opened. Radio stations began playing his songs. He booked local shows. He gave out free concerts. Slowly, word spread. There was something special about this young man with a guitar and a voice full of wanting. His second album, Poems, Prayers, and Promises, shot him into stardom. The public couldn't get enough. He became a regular on television. His holiday special, Rocky Mountain Christmas, was watched by over 60 million people. He was named one of America's most loved voices. But what few knew was that the same success that brought him joy also brought him sadness. Behind the scenes, he fought loneliness, feeling not good enough, and a growing need for alcohol. He was often described as a bad drunk, and his use of LSD and marijuana, though seen by some as part of the artist lifestyle, made things worse. Fame had brought him to the top of the world, but it also kept him away from the people he loved most. His second marriage to Australian actress Cassandra Delaney began in 1988 and ended in just 3 years. She would later describe him as mean and controlling. Their daughter, Jessie Bell, was born in 1989, but by 1991, the marriage had fallen apart. Denver's problems got deeper. He was arrested twice for drunk driving. He crashed his Porsche into a tree and the FAA took away his pilot's license. This was not the soft-spoken man fans saw on stage. This was someone falling apart. Yet, even in his darkest times, John Denver stayed committed to helping others bigger than himself. He raised money for children's hospitals. He gave money to groups that helped the environment. He built a safe place for wild animals. His work to help others stayed as real as ever, but the bad feelings never left him. And in 1997, the unthinkable happened. John Denver climbed into his small homemade aircraft, a Rutan Long Easy, for what should have been a simple flight. But the aircraft was broken. The fuel selector valve was put in a bad place. The fuel gauges were hard to read. As he flew over Monterey Bay, he lost control. The plane crashed into the Pacific. He died right away. He was 53. In the next part, we'll find out the shocking problems after his death. The machine failures that caused the crash and the memory that won't die, even as stories spread about who he really was behind the spotlight. October 12, 1997 was supposed to be just another peaceful day on California's coast. But by sunset, news began breaking across every major station. John Denver, America's musical sweetheart, environmental activist, and father of 3, was dead. His experimental plane had crashed into the waters off Monterey Bay. He was just 53 years old. And in that moment, the world lost not just a singer, but a voice of gentle fighting back, environmental peace, and emotional honesty. But what really happened in that final flight? And why were so many questions left without answers? The official report from the National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, showed something shocking. Denver's aircraft, a Route and Long Easy, was not a normal plane. It had been built by someone who wasn't a professional and had several serious design problems. The fuel tank selector inside the wreckage. Investigators found an unopened letter Denver had written just days before the crash. Though what was inside was never made public, sources close to the family say it was a very personal note. Part confession, part goodbye. He had felt something was coming. And Annie Denver, she had felt it, too. In a rare appearance at a memorial service held months later in Aspen, Annie spoke quietly to a packed crowd of musicians, friends, and strangers. Her voice shook as she said, "He lived with such fire. Sometimes it burned bright. Sometimes it burned too fast. But that fire gave us songs that made us feel seen." And then she whispered something off mic that several people near the front row heard. "He was always flying, whether in planes or in dreams. I just wish this time he'd stayed on the ground." It was the most honest thing she'd ever said in public about their life together. Because for all the love people had for him, John Denver was deeply broken. He was controlling in relationships, likely to get suddenly angry. And despite his public image as a man of peace, he often felt anger he didn't understand. His fights with who he was, his distance from his strict father, and his constant fear of not being good enough bothered him every day. But Annie wants the world to understand something. It wasn't just a song about love. It was a cry for connection. Asking to remember what really matters when everything else goes away. She never married again. She still lives in Colorado, quietly, peacefully, surrounded by photos, books, and the sound of birds in the pine trees. And every once in a while, she gets a letter from a stranger, someone who played Annie's song at their wedding, someone who got through a dark time because of John's words. Those letters remind her that while John Denver is gone, his soul sings on in songs, in memories, and in the quiet between every word he never got to say. Like if his music still fills up your senses. And subscribe for more stories that show the people behind the legends. Music.